Hello everybody. In the last class, we were discussing about pollinating agents. Now we know that all the things which help to bring about the process of pollination are known as agencies of pollination or pollinating agents. We have also classified them into two types. One is abiotic and the other is biotic. As the word itself explains that abiotic means these are the non-living things which help to bring about pollination. The pollination brought about by wind, anemophily, and the pollination brought about by water, hydrophily, are the two types of abiotic pollinating agencies or agents. We have discussed in detail of anemophily, hydrophily, within hydrophily, hypohydrophily, and epihydrophily. The examples of all also have been studied in detail in the last period. And these are also the primitive types of pollinating agents. The other one, biotic agencies of pollination, we will discuss it today. All the living things which help in the transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma are called as biotic agents of pollination or biotic agencies of pollination. Biotic means living. When living organisms bring about the process of pollination, it is said that these are the biotic agents for pollination. In that first one, Entomophilia, second, Ornithophilia, and the third is Chiropterophily. We have also discussed in details about Entomophilia in the last class. Entomophilia, the word itself means that when the pollination is brought about by the help of insects, it is known as entomophilia. Insects are many in number. They commonly visit the flowers and therefore they have the capacity unknowingly to transfer the pollen grains from the anther to the receptive stigma. Within entomophilia, bees are the most pollinating insects. And in general, of all the different types of biotic agencies of pollination or all the different types of agencies of pollination, the most pollination takes place by entomophilia. Almost 80% of the pollination in nature takes place through entomophilia. Bees, honeybees are the most common types which normally visit all the different kinds of flowers and they bring about entomophilous pollination. I have also explained that in all these different types of pollinating agents, what is most important? The most important factor to study here is the adaptations in flowers. What is important? Adaptations in flowers. So adaptations in flowers to study pollinating agents is most essential. We have studied adaptations in flowers for anemophily, examples of the adaptations for hydrophily, hypohydrophily, then epihydrophily. We have also studied the adaptations for entomophily. Flowers, adaptations in flowers means flowers must be brightly colored. They are generally large. If small, they are produced in groups. They are brightly colored. They produce fragrance. Means the flowers are scented to attract the insects. They are bright colored to attract the insects. They also produce nectar, sugary substance or sugary juice within the corolla, so that the insects can visit them and the pollination takes place. The pollen grains in entomophilous flowers are sticky, maybe sculptured with spines. The stigma is also sticky so that it can hold the pollen grains. So these are the different adaptations in case of entomophilia. And the most common type, or which for our study is the example of salvia, the special type. Instead of saying common type, salvia shows some important type of entomophilia. This also we have studied in the last period, how the liver mechanism of salvia by the bifurcated connective, the sterile anther lobe and the fertile anther lobe are separated from one another with the help of bifurcated connective, and how they help to bring about the pollination through liver mechanism has been also studied in the last period. Today we shall continue with Ornithophilia and Chiropterophilia. What is Ornithophilia? The pollination which is brought about by birds is known as Ornithophilia. Now, pollination brought about by birds. Which birds generally help in pollination? The common ones are the hummingbirds, sunbird. These are the common birds which help in pollination. Now let us study the adaptations in the flowers to achieve ornithophilia. When birds visit a flower, it means that the flower has to be very large. The flowers must be large, then the flowers must be brightly colored. They must produce abundant nectar, sugary substance, sugary juice within the corolla, so that the birds can visit the flower for the sake of nectar or food for them. These are all the adaptations which are necessary in the flowers for the birds to visit. And when the birds visit, the sticky pollen grains of from the anthers, they stick onto the body of the birds, and when the same bird visits another flower, there is a chance that the sticky stigma of another flower may receive the pollen grains which are on the bird's body, and thus pollination is achieved by the agency of the birds. The common examples of the birds which bring about the process of pollination are hummingbird, and another one is of the sunbird. The plants, which are the common plants which bring about the process in which Ornithophilia is the pollinating agent. These is bombax, wattlebrush, butea. There are examples, 2-3 examples given in our textbook. All the examples from the textbook are to be learned. We have to by-heart them. The examples of the birds are also essential. The most common feature which we have to remember in Ornithophilia is the ornithophilous flowers. They do not produce fragrance, the smell, scented smell, because the birds are very poor in the sense of smell. The birds cannot have smell. They cannot smell the scented fragrance. Therefore, the flowers which get pollinated by Ornithophilia, they do not produce any scent or fragrance. So, poor sense of smell in birds is to be remembered, which is not a characteristic in the flower. So common examples: hummingbird, sunbird. Common examples of plants pollinated by them are bombax, buttia, then bottlebrush, etc. The third one, Chiropterophilia. This process where the bats transfer the pollen grains from the anthers to the receptive stigma on another flower of another plant is known as Chiropterophilia, and the flowers are called as Chiropterophilous flowers. When we look at the bats at the night, we can say that these are little bit larger birds, and therefore when we study adaptations in flowers, we have to remember that flowers have to be very large. They must be stout. So when the birds or the bats, they sit on the flower must bear their weight. Therefore they must be strong and stout. The flowers must be large. They must be strong and stout. They have to produce more amount of nectar. Juice is required. Fragrance is also, strong fragrance is present. May not be a sweet smelling fragrance. The odor may not be a good one, but fragrance is produced in the plants which are pollinated by bats. And adaptations, large flowers, more amount of nectar. The flowers must be stout and colored, maybe colorless. Then they also produce fragrance in larger amounts, maybe good or bad. Example of the plants pollinated by bats are the Gygella, Adansonia, Anthocephalus. These are the common examples which are the agents of pollination in case of Chiropterophilus. These are the flowers or plants which are pollinated by the Chiropterophilia. So with this we complete the study of pollinating agents. Today let us study outbreeding devices. What is breeding? In general, breeding is the successful process of pollination and further the process of fertilization, formation of seed, fruit, etc. The process of sexual reproduction is to be studied as breeding process. Here we know outbreeding devices. What is outbreeding device? It means that we are studying something with reference to cross-pollination. It is not in the same flower or on the same plant. The process of pollination, which involves two different plants, is known as xenogamy, cross-pollination. And here, today the topic which we are going to study are the outbreeding devices of the plants. Outbreeding devices itself also means that these are the contrivances for cross-pollination. Now what do you understand by this now? Outbreeding devices or contrivances for cross-pollination. These words, the headings suggest that There are some adaptations in some flowers or in some plants which favor only and only cross-pollination, and somehow self-pollination is avoided. Special mechanism, special adaptation develops in the plants within the flowers, and these adaptations help the plant to compulsorily achieve cross-pollination, xenogamy, and avoid self-pollination, that is autogamy and geitonogamy. Now let us study which are these different types of outbreeding devices or contrivances for cross-pollination. Unisexuality, dichogamy, prepotency, heterostyling, hercogamy, self-incompatibility. These are the different types of the outbreeding devices which favor only cross-pollination and avoid self-pollination. Let us start with the first one, unisexuality. As the word itself suggests that in many plants the flowers are unisexual. Means the flowers bear only either androecium, the stamens, or the flowers bear only the gynoecium. Not both the sex organs are not present in the same flower. Such flowers may be again classified according to their position on the plants. Some plants are monoecious and some are dioecious. What do you mean by monoecious plant and what is dioecious plant? Monoecious plants means both male and female, androecium and gynoecium, are present on the same plant but on two different flowers. Male flower is different, female flower is different, but both of them are produced on the same plant. Male different, female different, but plant one. Such plants are called as monoecious plants. For example, maize. In maize, in the last class, we have also seen the diagram on the board. The maize plant has inflorescence at the top, and the inflorescence at the top is the male inflorescence, consisting of only male flowers having only stamens. Whereas the maize plant, in the axil of the leaves, has female inflorescence consisting of female flowers. Male flowers at the top, male inflorescence. Female flowers in the axil of the leaves, female inflorescence. So male and female are separate. Plant one. Such plant is known as monoecious plant. Common example which we study is of maize. Diagram is also given in our textbook. In the last class we also have drawn the diagram of maize plant to study Armytrophy. Now when male and female plants flowers are separate on the same plant, generally such a kind of unisexuality also avoids self-pollination and favors more of cross-pollination. Hence, monoecious condition is also studied as an outbreeding device for cross-pollination, compulsory cross-pollination. Chances of self-pollination means on the same plant pollination in monoecious, in maize, cannot be denied, but it is mostly a outbreeding device for cross-pollination. Second is dioecious plant. Remember, monoecious and dioecious words are strictly with reference to plant, not flower. Dioecious plant means male plant separate, female plant separate. Di two. What two? Plants two. Mono. What one? Plant one. One plant, stamen separate, staminate flowers separate, pistillate flowers separate. Plant one. Here, plant two. Male plant consisting of male flowers separate, female plant consisting of female flowers separate. Example, mulberry, papaya. Male plant and female plant are separate. When there are two separate plants with separate flowers, we cannot speak of self-pollination. There is no chance to think of self-pollination. There can be only and only cross-pollination or xenogamy. Hence, dioecious condition is a compulsory outbreeding, a contrivance for cross-pollination. Examples, mulberry and papaya. Next is dichogamy. The gamy word here refers to maturation period. Dichogamy is an outbreeding device. It means the maturation period of the bisexual flowers. There is a flower in which male and female stamens and carpels are present on the same flower, within the same flower. Now, when male and female in the same flower, pollination should take place in the same flower. But here, dichogamy is an outbreeding device. It is explaining of cross-pollination. It means that the maturation period, the gamy period, the maturation period of androecium and gynoecium is different. Two different maturation periods are present within a flower. Flower 1, this matures in the different time period, this matures in the different time period. This is dichogamy. So when in the plants, the flowers are bisexual, the maturation period is different, the process is called as dichogamy. Depending upon the maturation period, the dichogamy is of again two types. One is protandry and another one is protogyne. When the androecium matures earlier than the gynoecium, so this is a flower, the androecium matures earlier in the first week and the gynoecium matures in the second week. So androecium matures first. The process is known to be protandry. And the flowers are called as protandrous flowers. Example, this florets in sunflowers. So, when androecium matures earlier and gynoecium matures later, the pollen grains from the same flower or cells from the same plant cannot pollinate the stigma on the same flower or the plant. Hence, protandry does not allow self-pollination. It favors the cross-pollination. Therefore, protandry is an outbreeding device. For what? To achieve cross-pollination. The same is protogyne. In a flower, if gynoecium matures earlier and the androecium matures later on, then the condition is called protogyning and the flowers are called as protogynous flowers. For example, gloriosa. In such cases also, as the androecium and gynoecium do not mature at the same time, this cannot explain, they cannot contribute for self-pollination, and therefore both the types are the outbreeding devices, the contrivances for cross-pollination. Prepotency is another type, another contrivance or another outbreeding device for what? To achieve cross-pollination. What does this mean? Now say for example, on the stigma, the carpel, the stigma of the apple flowers, the pollen grains are deposited on the stigma from the same flower or another flower or from the flower of another plant. So many pollen grains may come on the stigma of the apple plant from different plants or on the same plant, but the pollen grain from other plant has more vigor. The pollen grain of another plant will germinate much better, faster, and give good results than the pollen grain of the same flower. So this physiological approach of the pollen grain of different flower or different plant for its proper germination and the process of fertilization is known as the prepotency, and such kind of example is apple. So prepotency is pollen grain from same flower does not germinate properly on the stigma. From pollen grain from another flower germinates much better, gives good yield, better fertilization. Example is apple. Fourth one, Heterostyle or heteroandry. Heteromorphological characters. Morphologically, within the plants, there are flowers which have different lengths of the style. Now we know that ovary style stigma. Ovary style stigma. This is style. This is ovary. And this is stigma. These are the parts of a typical carpel. Now, what is heterostyling? In most of the plants, not most, in some plants, such as primula or primrose, the style, the length of the style is different. In some, the style is short. In some, the style is long. So different kinds of style of the same flower, same plant flowers can be seen. Some flowers with short style, some flower with long style. Such a condition is called as heterostyling. The morphological difference in the length of this style creates a gap between androecium and gynoecium in the same flower. And it has been also studied that such kind of flowers with heterostyle condition, one flower with short style, one flower with long style, another flower with medium style, such difference in style also favors xenogamy or cross-pollination. As it favors cross-pollination, Heterostyle is also considered as an outbreeding device to achieve xenogamy and to avoid autogamy or heterogamy. It is to avoid self-pollination. Examples: primula or primaries. Fifth one is hercogamy. In hercogamy, the stamens in case of calotropes, the common example of hercogamy which is studied, the stamens have a different kind of arrangement in calotropes where the style and stigma are above the stamens. The style and stigma are above and the stamens they lie below. When the stamens lie quite below, then the style and stigma, this gap, it also does not allow self-pollination. This gap also favors cross-pollination. Therefore, heterogamy is also an outbreeding device for cross-pollination or to achieve only and only the xenogamy. The last one, self-incompatibility, sixth one. There are 6 outbreeding devices for cross-pollination. Self-incompatibility or self-sterility. So, if a flower has both androecium and gynoecium, both of the anthers and the stigma mature at the same time. Flower is bisexual. Both the sex organs mature at the same time. Then naturally the pollen grains from the anther, they get deposited on the stigma by any agency or without any agency. But even if they mature at the same time in a flower, the pollen grains fall onto the stigma. The further germination, pollen germination to produce pollen tube or male gametophyte does not take place within a flower. This means that the pollen grain of the same flower or same plant are self-incompatible. They cannot germinate on the stigma of the same flower. This characteristic is called as self-incompatibility or self-sterility. It means that the stigma has to be pollinated from another flower, another from another plant. Hence, it is also an outbreeding device or a contrivance to achieve only and only cross-pollination and to avoid self-pollination. Examples are tobacco, theca, etc. So with these 6 different types of contrivances, the unisexuality, dichogamy, prepotency, heterostyling, hercogamy and self-incompatibility, we come to understand that the plants develop some kind of characteristics, maybe morphological, chemical, or the other unisexual types. These also favor only one kind of pollination and avoid the other kind of pollination. Here they favor only cross-pollination and they avoid self-pollination. So with the outbreeding devices for cross-pollination, today let us stop our class here and continue the next topic in the next period. Thank you.